Hey, what's going on guys, and welcome back to another Fallout 4 modding video. Today we're checking out a handful of weapon mods, specifically rifles. Now, I know that seems like a pretty general term, but we've done a lot of videos like this in the past covering assault rifles or pistols or SMGs, and I wanted to cover rifles. Now, I didn't want to say battle rifles or marksman rifles or infantry rifles or carbines because that might be a little bit too limiting and I wouldn't be able to find a ton of mods on the Nexus, at least that weren't by myself. Speaking of which, I want to specifically say that I am not going to be using any of my own mods for this type of video. I really want to use this to showcase mods by other people, because if I was doing semi-auto rifles, I'd be able to fill this thing entirely with weapons of my own, but again, that is not my goal here. You can see my own weapons just by going over to my mod page. This is to show you some more that maybe you haven't seen before. So again, today we're checking out sort of the semi-auto rifle category, full-length rifles that are either going to be a battle rifle or marksman rifle, something that is intended for long range and typically in a heavier caliber. Now, let's go ahead and get started with the first mod to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, and that is the Walther Gewehr 43 by Subliter. This is a mod that I've actually had in my load order for a very long time, and I have to say I really enjoy this thing. This is a very cool rifle, very nice animations, and altogether just fits very well into the game, and I think it's a nice lore-friendly addition to any load order. Additionally, if you're going to download this, I'd also recommend picking up Another One's add-on for this, which has even more attachments that allow you to customize this even further than it does in the base version of the mod. And you know that I do love customization and more attachments, so that is definitely a must-have for me. When I do use this in my load order, I use the add-on as well. Now, like I said, this thing does have custom animations. As you can see, it also has custom models and textures as well. A handful of attachments on its own, but again, more with that add-on. And additionally, this thing is injected into the world, or at least it is if you're using that add-on that I talked about. On its own, it's actually craftable over at the chemistry station, but if you do get Another One's add-on, it is going to inject it into the level list, so you will be able to find this thing on enemies, which I highly recommend. Another good reason to use that add-on. If my memory serves me correctly, I believe this thing is chambered in 308, making this a perfect battle rifle for the mid to late game. It's a very nice weapon with wonderful animations, and I have to say this one is just a classic to me. It's one that I've been using for a long time, and I really enjoy it, and I recommend it every time I get a chance to. Now that you get the idea of what kind of weapons we're talking about, let's move on to the next mod, known as the SVT-40 by asXas and Haru. You may recognize this one. This one might be a bit more popular than the previous. This thing is a Russian big weapon. This thing is going to feature custom animations, tons of customization over at the weapons workbench in the form of attachments and skins, a handful of uniques that you can find as well that will not only have a unique aesthetic and unique effects, but even unique animations for some of those, which is really interesting. And altogether, this makes for a wonderful new long-range rifle that is customizable in not only the way that it looks, but also the way that it functions. You can have this thing be more of a DMR, but you can also, I believe, get this thing into full auto. Now, if memory serves me correctly, this is also going to be using 308, much like the last mod. I'm not saying you can't download both, but if you're not a fan of redundancy, then it may be worth picking one over the other. But if you don't mind that, then I say get both, absolutely. This weapon is also going to be added to the leveled list innately, no add-on required. It'll start spawning out in the world after level 16 on gunners. But on top of that, there's also a small addition with this mod, which is a new bayonet melee weapon. So the bayonet itself is actually a knife that you can use as a melee weapon, and that'll start spawning after level 10. It is also injected into the leveled list. And if you get your hands on one, you can add it to the gun as a bayonet properly, but it is going to require that you find one of these knives, which I think is pretty cool. Additionally, like I said, there are a couple of uniques, one known as Azurius and one known as Krasnaya Zima, both offering their own unique aesthetics, and again, one of them having custom animations specifically for that rifle, where when you reload it, I believe you take a shot of vodka and throw it on the ground, which is pretty dang funny. It extends the reload quite a bit, but it is funny. This is another one of those weapons that I consider to be a classic. Lots of people know about this one, but in case you didn't, this is one that I highly recommend checking out. If you're a fan of Russian firearms, or you just want a nice long heavy rifle with an aesthetic that fits pretty well in Fallout 4, this is one that I think you should get your hands on because it's pretty dang nice. If you'd like to check it out, like the last one and like the rest in this video, this will be linked down in the description below. Now, speaking of classic weapons, we're checking out the M1 Garand, a World War II classic by asXas. This is another one that's going to be a nice, heavy rifle that is going to fit perfectly in Fallout 4's load order. This one possibly more so than the previous ones because this is actually an American rifle. Again, the M1 Garand not only being an American rifle, but being one that has been featured in Fallout before, in Fallout New Vegas, as the battle rifle. This thing comes with beautiful custom models and textures, and of course, wonderful custom animations for the M1 Garand, as it does have a clip-fed reload, and of course, it does come with the iconic Garand ping. Surprisingly, for an M1 Garand, this thing has a good bit of customization over at the weapons workbench, including a handful of experimental scopes and muzzle devices, and also some custom things like tape wraps and such to let you customize this thing not only visually, but also in terms of how this weapon performs as well. And I believe this thing even has options for see-through scopes integration. This weapon also does, of course, come with level-less injections, so you can actually find this thing out in the world. It'll start spawning on gunners and vendors after level 17. And then this also comes with a bayonet, much like the last mod, that you can also find on gunners and raiders after level 13. Now, much like the last one, if you get that bayonet, you can attach it to the weapons workbench, but it also functions as a standalone knife if you want a new melee weapon as well. There are also a couple of uniques that you can pick up with this mod, which is very nice. One known as Blue Betty, which is going to be wrapped completely in blue tape, and another one known as This Machine, which is literally just the unique from New Vegas, but it is a very nice recreation. You can get both of these by finding them out in the world as they have been hand-placed. But no spoilers here, you're going to want to find these ones as they are very, very nice, and I don't want you to be able to beeline and get yourself a heavy rifle in the early game. Speaking of heavy rifle, this is going to be a theme today. I believe this one also uses 308 innately, but you can of course download a patch for this thing to get it in 30.6, as it should be for an M1 Garand. I believe it was 308 in New Vegas as well, but that's a little bit more of a limitation of the sandbox, as I'm sure it was for asXas as well. They probably didn't want to add a brand new ammo type for this weapon, but if you're using something like munitions, you can get a patch that will make this 30.6 so that it performs as it should in real life, but it's really up to you and what you prefer in terms of realism. Altogether, another great mod, as it should be. It is asXas after all. They make great stuff. And if you're not using this one already, this is pretty much, I think, the only M1 Garand mod that we have right now. So it's one that I definitely recommend checking out. Now, for our next mod, we have a really interesting one. This is probably the oldest one on this list. This is the G67 Battle Rifle by Junnari. This is going to be a rifle that's not really based on one particular gun. You can tell that it has some inspiration from things like AKs and some other weapons, but this isn't a real rifle. This is probably the only, no, it's not the only fictional rifle this lists, but it is the only rifle that we've never seen before. This is going to be completely custom made by Junnari, and I think this thing is really, really cool. It uses combat rifle animations in a very creative way to make a very creative rifle. This is semi-auto in standard. It is intended to be used standalone in the version of the mod that I am going to be linking, but I think there is a replacer version as well, so you can download this to replace the combat rifle if you don't like the combat rifle. And funny enough, by default, I believe this weapon uses 308. Now that I'm thinking about it, I hadn't really thought about it previously. I think every weapon in this list uses 308. So that's funny. I think some of them do include rechambers, so you can get them in different calibers, but by default, all of these are going to use 308, so whoops on my part. Now then, this thing's going to include a ton of customization over at the weapons workbench, much like a lot of the mods we talked about today, including a ton of different attachments that change not only the way the weapon functions, but also we have some that change the way the weapon looks, like the option to switch out black polymer furniture for wooden furniture, so you can change out things that are going to be purely aesthetic. Like I said, this thing does not have custom animations, as it does use the vanilla combat rifle animations, but if you have any combat rifle animation replacers, those will automatically apply to this weapon, so that you will get custom animations that way. Now, if you get this thing as a replacer for the combat rifle, it will function as a replacer, and it'll spawn anywhere the combat rifle would spawn. And I may or may not use 45. I haven't actually tested the replacer version because I don't mind the combat rifle in vanilla. But in the standalone version, this thing will spawn in 308, and it will spawn after level 38. It is a semi-auto 308 gun, so that is totally understandable, especially because I think you can modify this thing to be in full auto. And at 308, that is a lot of damage, especially if you're using damage modifiers that change the weapon's damage by caliber. So 38 is totally justifiable. This weapon may seem rough around the edges to some of you, but it is a pretty old one. It's got some age on it, but I still think it is totally usable and very, very nice. I love the design of this thing, and for being something that's fully custom, I think it's a great design by Junnari. Really, really cool and super creative, something that fits in Fallout 4 very well. And now that takes us to the last official mod of this list, which is the DKS 501 Sniper Rifle. This is going to be a recreation of the Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas Sniper Rifle. Now, when it comes to semi-auto rifles, it's kind of hard to find stuff on Nexus, and I know typically some might classify this as a sniper rifle, but it is still semi-auto. It's 308 like the rest of the mods that we talked about today, and you don't have to use it with a scope, so you can use it sort of like a marksman or battle rifle. Now, speaking of which, this thing does have tons of customization, much like the others in this mod. This mod actually, though, might have the most customization out of any of them. It might be a toss-up between this and the SVT-40, as this one has a ton of really cool stocks that were never featured in the previous games, although it does, of course, have the ones that were as well. One of my favorite additions with this mod, though, is all of the junk attachments, including junk barrels, junk stocks, and junk sights to be used by raiders, looking as though they modified this or maybe found a broken one and tried to fix it up themselves. Alternatively, though, you can use the factory parts and make this thing look like it did in the classic games. Now, when this mod first came out, it didn't have custom animations, but it has since been updated to have custom animations that look very, very nice, and really help this thing feel like a complete package. It's the only thing that was missing when it first came out, and now it feels like a proper standalone weapon. Also, as far as I know, this is the only DKS mod out there, so this one still holds up as a pretty serviceable use for that weapon. If you want one, this is pretty much the only option that you got, and it's a pretty good one. Now, this thing is integrated into the leveled list, so you can find it out in the world on enemies. It does actually spawn out there, which is really, really nice, but on top of that, there are a ton of uniques, including the Gobi Campaign Scout Rifle, the Circle of Steel Sniper Rifle, the Victory Rifle, and the Reservist Rifle can all be found in this mod scattered around the wasteland. Additionally, this thing has a handful of rechambers, so if you don't want to use it in 308, you can actually use it in different calibers, like 38 if you have a surplus of that ammo type. This weapon is definitely another one I'd consider to be classic. It is an older mod, but it's one that has aged very well and can be used in any load order, in my opinion. I definitely still use it myself, as again, I love the classic sniper rifle, and this is, I believe, the only mod that adds it. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and start wrapping things up there. These are some wonderful little mods here. If you want to check any of them out, they will all be linked down in the description below. But if you want to get your hands on even more semi-auto rifles for your load order, or maybe you didn't like the ones that I listed, I will just say, if you head over to my mod page, we actually have a lot of them for some reason. I was trying to tally up mods on the Nexus, and I was having trouble finding different rifles that fit this category, but I didn't have any trouble finding them on my own mod list. Off the top of my head, we have things like the Militia Carbine, the Ruger Rifle Pack, the Cowboy Carbine, and if you want something heavy like the weapons featured in this video, you can even pick up something like my FN FAL. There are a lot of options over there, so go ahead and check that out if you want to, but again, I'm not going to feature them fully here because this is, again, much more to showcase other people's mods. But if you want even more, go check that out because it may have something that maybe you don't have yet. So yeah, guys, that is it for rifle mods. A very fun category for Fallout 4. I feel like it's one that people ask for quite a bit when they're looking for different types of mods to use. So hopefully this helps some of you find some weapons that maybe you hadn't seen before, or at the very least, maybe reminded you of some that maybe you had seen but forgot about. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, consider dropping a like. If you'd like to support my work directly, whether it's the videos I do here on YouTube or the mods I'm making over on the Nexus, you can do so using the link down in the description below to check me out on Patreon. It's a great place to donate if you're into that kind of thing, but by no means is it necessary. Purely optional for those who want to do it. With that, again, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace!